the idea of this is we have discussed two scholars. One was passed in 2021, Rishti Modi, and Masira Sheikh who passed in November 2023 exam. Both of them have cleared with flying colors. They have come highest in their respective exams, both first attempters. Rishti has got highest marks in 5 papers out of 6. Masira 4 papers out of 6. I think it clearly shows that if you study in the right manner, the exam is completely doable in one attempt. But you have to have that dedication and you have to have the right way of study. So I will hand over to Rishti and to Masira. They plan to do however they can to give you some guidance, and hopefully the tips will help and it will help you clear the exam. Putting some effort, it's an exam requires a lot of effort, it requires a lot of thinking. It's not like a small level. And so what feedback we are getting from the examiner is that the level of students has fallen, the level of exam paper that they answer are not being answered properly. Many of you who are appearing, please come forward. There is cases. Papers are not being answered in the manner. It's frustrating for an examiner who is a professional practicing solicitor to devote time to setting a paper. Each paper takes at least half an hour to 45 minutes for an hour to correct. So when you find papers that are not being answered, please at some level it's a professional exam. Please do not appear for the exam. Or if you appear, make an attempt, put in your best effort possible. I know that some of you are having challenges to not getting enough leave, etc. So try and give it your best effort. Don't just appear to answer some complete rubbish. Because it is very frustrating. We are then getting examiners who say we don't want to tell. Because we are not getting good students who are writing these papers. This is not to scare you guys, but to help you in trying to understand that we are as professionals giving a lot of time and effort to see that this exam is correct. So I'll hand it over to Rishti and Masira, and I thank them for being here.
I'll just tell you how we propose to take today's session. We take it under. So we propose to take this session under 3 heads. How to prepare before the 6-month break, so pre your study break. The second head will be during your study break, and that will be under 2 heads. The first 4 months of your study break and then the last 2 months of your study break, because they are quite different of how you should prepare. And then just a few tips of how to write a paper, what an examiner would want to see in the paper. So these are the heads that we will be following. What we propose to do, both Rishti and I, then we speak on all of these heads together. We have a back and forth, and we won't do one, I won't go first and she won't go second. So it's more interactive. You don't have to hear one person for a very long time. And you get 2 perspectives, because both of us have studied in similar manners, but also again in very different manners. I would like to preface this by saying that this is what helped us, but at the same time, what you have to know that whatever helps you study, right? These are things that helped us. This is not absolute gospel. So these are the things that would probably help you guys if you have followed it, but if it is too difficult and you have another manner in which you usually prepare for exams, I'm sure all of you have been to exams before, you'll have a certain kind of format that you follow. You can follow those too. But these are the things that we followed, and hopefully you get 2 different perspectives. and at the end of the session, we have a question and answer, so you can have doubts and stuff. Okay?
So if you want to have any question, ask me question also, that's also fine. You can just maybe raise your hand or something. But yeah, so the idea is, like she mentioned, we're giving you suggestions of what others maybe have told us or we experienced as being good ways to study for the exam. But if something else works for you, go ahead and do that. Do what's comfortable to you, because eventually that's what's going to help you study the best in this way. Okay, so let's start about with the pre-study bit. So you've obviously signed it up because you've been working with the solicitor for 3 years. Maybe in the last year or in the last 6 months of when you're working, when you're just before you go on to your study break, what you can start doing is, while working it's difficult to start studying really, while we all like to think that we can start reading while we're working, practically it doesn't work that way. What you can do though is maybe start collecting all of your study material. So what you will do is maybe speak to your seniors, speak to other people who've given the exam, start taking recommendations. There's no set syllabus per se in the exam, in the sense that there's no set books that they will ask you questions from. So you will have to, it's mostly bare acts, commentaries, notes that other people have made. That's where you're going to start studying from. So you can start collecting books or going through different commentaries and seeing what works for you, what doesn't. There are various books, different people will suggest different things. I would say maybe run through the books and see what works for you and which book you are comfortable with, and start buying your books and collecting all your materials. You don't waste time in your 6 months collecting all this information. What you can also start doing is, the exam prescribes case laws which you do for the last 3 years from AIB, Bombay and the Supreme Court. So you can start collecting the case laws that are already out. What I did personally was, and this is something that my senior suggested, I had a register which I had with all of the acts in it, and I went to the AIR, and I picked up, like I went to the head notes of all of the cases that were there, and I made notes for all of the important ones, the ones that I thought would come in the paper. So at the end of my, well, not 6 month period, but like closer to the end of my exam, I had a whole book of all of the case laws that I needed. So I could quickly run through them, or if I had a question or a doubt, I could go through them, and I segregated them act-wise. It was easier for me to find the case law. Another thing that I would recommend is, before you go on your study leave, really think about how many papers you want to give. Like, you want to give all 6, or some people prefer to give maybe 3 papers. Whatever you want to do, decide from the beginning, because a lot of times, and this is something that a lot of people have mentioned to me, is that they start out thinking, oh, I'm going to give all 6 papers, and then maybe a month before the exam they decide, oh, I'm not ready now, so I'm going to give only 3, but you wasted 5 months studying for all 6 papers. Whereas if you had decided from the beginning that you're going to give 3, you could have focused more on those 3 papers. So whatever you decide from the beginning. Personally, I thought giving all 6 papers together is a great way to start. So I think that's a good way, but some people are comfortable with doing 3, and that's also fine. So it's a personal choice.
Okay, so from what she said, right, when you're reading judgments, what you can do is read 1 judgment per day. So you're going to be doing this for 2.5 years. That is very helpful. So the only way that you can really prepare and understand a section and act is through judgments, right? So you can read 1 judgment per day, make a short summary. Second thing that you can do in a 2.5 years prior to your study break is be very familiar with your syllabus. So you know what acts are going to come in your paper, what sections are going to come in your paper. And when you're doing matters on those particular subjects and on those acts, you can also note down whatever important case law that has been mentioned in the matters that you are doing. When you're practicing, that's the second best way to also understand the section. You will see it in practice, you will understand how it's used, right? So these are the 2 things that you can definitely do. This is in the 2.5 years. The 1 month prior to your exams, as Christine said, you can collect your study material. Don't waste your time in the study break. Books, I think you can ask anyone. There are various commentaries for each subject. I can also share later. I'll put it on some article group. I'm sure I'll part of some WhatsApp group. Either you'll get it from that, or we'll share it even after the lecture. That's not an issue. But just all of this needs to be done prior to the study day. So you are ready to take the study day headstrong. You have to start strong. So that for that you need to be well prepared with your books. I think that covers what you can do prior to the exam. What both Rishti and I think it's very difficult to sit down and study in the 2.5 years that you're working. So instead of opening books and studying every day, this is a better way to understand your acts, understand case law, and to have an understanding of what you're getting. Right? Now I'll start with 6 months and then we can.
May I just add something? One thing that I did when I was young, which was God knows how many years ago, was before I went on my study, because I used to at that point in time use a Bombay and used to travel by train. So on my way back home, I would carry a bare act. We had general acts. We had a paper called General Act, which had 11 acts. Many of them were not taught in LLB. So I used to carry them and I used to just read them, just blindly read them. So by the time I went for my study day, I just read them as if it was a storybook. So I was at least familiar when I had the General Acts paper. Of course, for us it was an open book at that time. When I had the General Acts paper, at least when I was doing my analysis of papers, I knew that okay, this appears to be insolvency, this appears to be cooperative fraud, this appears to be Bombay Public Trust, or whatever. So it was easier to analyze paper. So maybe you could just start reading bare acts which you never read before also. You don't need to study, but just read it as if it's a storybook. I know it's not very interesting, but you could read it just to familiarize yourself so that when you have to analyze your paper, which I'm sure they both will tell you about, it is easier to identify which act it belongs to. Because many of the papers are spread across multiple acts.
Just one more thing I forgot to add was another thing, 2.5 years or whatever period you have left of your articleship. Most of you might be in specific departments, but as far as possible, try and do different areas of work. So if you're doing litigation, non-litigation, try and do both kind of matters, because typically what will happen is you end up taking a certain kind of work and then you just continue with that for years, and then at the end of your 2.5 years, you realize that you don't actually know anything. So if you're doing conveyancing, you realize you don't know a lot about litigation, or if you're doing only litigation, you might not know conveyancing at all. And that I think can be a hindrance when you're studying. Or if you've practiced all the various areas, or at least major areas of work, it will be easier and quicker for you to understand the acts later on when you're studying.
I think that covers what you have to do prior to your study break. Now we come to what you should do during your study break. Right? The first thing I would suggest all of you all to do is create a timetable for yourself. Right? It needs to be your first read. So you have to read through every single commentary, every single act. You have to read through it because you have to understand concept. So you have to add that to your timetable, and a couple of revisions. I would say at least 3 to 4 times is something you should revise before the exam. So the first thing, as soon as your study break starts, create a timetable. You will not be able to follow it because you won't have that understanding of what subject will take how much time. But create a timetable so it keeps you under a schedule. So there will be some sort of pressure on yourself by yourself to follow something while you're studying, because it becomes very difficult initially when you're just getting into studying. The second thing is, it might start slow, but start, even if you're doing 2 hours a day, do 2 hours a day today. Then make it 3 hours tomorrow. But gradually increase. It is difficult to start with 12 hours, and I don't think anyone will be able to do that. So slowly but surely increase, right? Don't do 2 hours for an entire month. Increase reading every day. That will also help you with during a very long stretch of studying, because in the last 2 months you will be studying throughout the day. The only break probably you have is to eat and to sleep. but this will come to that later. So first create a timetable. What you do is when you start your study page, you have to read. And when you're reading, two things that really help me: mark out important topics while you're reading and try to create notes. Right? You can take notes from your seniors, but I would suggest that you should create your own notes, because the idea of making your own notes is putting, pen to paper, making your points. You know what you've written, your abbreviation. So you're just going to read someone else's notes. At the end of the day, you're going to see reading from commentary, reading from notes. So that the idea of making notes is really lost in that. So the essence over here is to, once you put your hand to writing, also you remember better. The way you should create notes, and that's how I did it, it needs to be as concise that when the idea is that when you're revising in the 2 weeks that the exams are going on, it should be only the notes that you done and nothing else. So when you're making the notes, even the first two, right, your notes will be probably much bulkier than it will be when you're studying for the final revision. So first try making notes which might be bulkier, but as you're revising, make it more and more concise. So at the end, in the last week when you're studying, you don't have that much to study from, and it's just a concise bit of notes. Because revising the entire commentary, entire paragraph during the exams is very difficult. So that's the idea of making notes. Secondly, like Drishti said, it might be difficult to practice in every area. So what you can do is that when you're studying, there will be subjects that you haven't practiced. So there are concepts, certain topics that you will not understand. So when you're doing your first read, at that point of time, you can try to understand all these topics. You can have, from you have peers who are article clubs, you can have a group where someone's done corporate, someone's done litigation. You can discuss it. Right? When you discuss it, it's better to understand the concept. So try making like a peer group of article clubs where you can discuss these topics if you're not able to practice everything. So that's a good way to, you have your first read, initially start reading.
So one thing that I feel like is very important to stress is, typically what happens is, because you've been working for 3 years, you've now taken your break, people end up taking the break very lightly. Initially they'll be like lazing around, going to meet friends and all. Obviously you're going to do that in the first month, but eventually make sure that you stop all other activities and you gradually, as you said, phase them out as you increase your studying. Don't take this 6 months lightly. It goes by very, very fast. And the portion is extremely vast. So it is going to take you very long to study. So do not, initially you're going to think, oh, I have 6 months to study, but you only have 6 months to study, and it is not enough to finish the portion. So you really need to be very, very serious when you're studying. One thing that really helped me while I was doing my studying was, yes, create a timetable, but also try and swap out your subjects frequently, because what you would typically end up doing is, maybe since CPC is generally the practice and procedures of the first paper, you probably pick up that book and then try and finish that and then move on to the next subject. But you will not be able to estimate how long you're going to take to do that, and you might not even end up sticking to your timetable. So what I would say is swap out either weekly or daily, or maybe once in 2 weeks you swap out your subject, so that by the end of your 6 months, even if you haven't managed to cover your entire portion, at least you know enough of everything that you're comfortable to give the exam. Otherwise, you know one subject really, really well, and then you might be very weak in the last subject that you studied. So try and swap out. So what I used to do was, every day I picked a separate subject. That might be too quick for some people, so you can do maybe every week you pick another subject, or every 2 weeks you pick another subject. So that way you study a little bit of everything. Another thing that you should start doing is, for the conveyancing paper, the covenants that we have, and for the practice and procedure paper, the pleadings that you have, maybe start making it a practice where you write down one covenant or one pleading or one small thing every single day. when you repeatedly write it, you will remember the covenants. Because we use computers today, we don't actually type them out. So we end up skipping the covenants quite often and we don't actually read them. So it's very difficult to remember them. But if you start this practice over the course of 6 months, you will learn all of these. So it will be much quicker for you to remember them and much quicker for you to write them when it comes time for the exam. And in general, start practicing writing. So like she said, you write, make your notes and get into the habit of writing because the paper is quite long, 3 hours of writing. If you practice writing slow and then you get used to the idea of writing, you'll be able to finish your paper, or otherwise, like I struggled to finish my paper. So that's something that I would say you should do.
Sorry, I just keep trying to take over. One thing that when Drishti talked about covenants, one thing I was told by my seniors was that before you go on leave, you find out which covenants keep coming. Record a tape. Hear that tape when you're eating lunch, when you're tired, when you're, just when you randomly want to take some rest. Half an hour you hear 1 or 2 covenants. The fact that it keeps playing, it's like a song. The fact that it keeps playing in your mind, you are absorbing. And studying a covenant of 30 lines, 40 lines at one stretch, I found impossible. I'm not a mother. So I had broken it up into different parts. Every covenant, if you read the conveyance, you will find that each covenant, a covenant of charity, a covenant of quiet enjoyment, a covenant of free from encumbrance. You can actually break them up. They are one long sentence, but they each have different parts to it. And you can learn each part at a time. So you learn, say, 2 lines of a covenant on a given day. The next day you repeat those 2 lines and learn another 2 lines. So it may take you a week to learn a covenant. And what used to work for me was every morning before I started studying, I would read 2 lines, learn up those lines. Next day I would learn the next. Then I would start writing once the covenant got stuck in my head. And when suppose I finished covenant of quiet enjoyment, the next time when I was doing the free from encumbrance, I would revise the covenant of quiet enjoyment so that I don't forget it, because it's a matter of being able to remember and reproduce at the end of 6 months. It's not a matter, and it is something which once you've studied, if you've studied it properly, even 30 years down the line, today if I have to read it, I'll be able to pick mistakes. Because it has got stuck in my head. It's like memory which is ingrained. You learn swimming, you don't forget it, even if you have a break of 20 years. So try and do it that way, because learning a covenant at one shot is not an easy job. There are people who mark and mark very easily. So for them it is very easy. But for people who don't, break it up into different parts. That was one thing. The other thing that both Masira and Krishti said was build up your studying thing. So when I was going on studying, my senior said, do not think that on day 1 you can start studying 10 hours. You will burn out by the end of 6 months. So build it up gradually. Take your breaks. Watch a series, watch a TV serial. But give your time, specified time. Half an hour break, 1 hour break, 2 hour break, go for a walk, meet some friends. Initially do that. In the last 2 months you won't have time for all that. So I agree that 6 months will go away very fast. But if you try and do 10 hours from day 1, and some of you may be able to do it. Like we had a girl appearing for the exam at our time. 15 days before the exam, she was so saturated that she just couldn't study for the last 1 week. She passed first attempt and she studied so well, but at the end of the day, we want to build it up. So, I'll hand it over.
So now we'll come to the last 2 months, and like she said, that's the home stretch. That's the point where you build up your studying, you finished at least your first reading, and you've done at least 1 revision, 1 or 2 revisions. I think by that point, at least that much you should have finished by this point. And you should have built up your studying where you're studying at least 12 hours a day. And from this point onwards, you have to now forget like everything else. You don't have friends, you don't have a phone, you don't have a TV. There's no distraction, like no parties, nothing. At the most, like you mentioned, you can do like a walk or something just to refresh your mind, but now this is the only thing that's there in your life. One more thing that I would like to mention is when you start studying, choose where you would like to study. Like some people are comfortable studying at home, some people find that distracting, so they go to a library. So you could maybe like join a library or something. Both of us, I think, like to study at night, so we used to, everyone was asleep, so there was no distractions at that point. So make sure that wherever you are, your distractions are at a minimum, which will help you build up your study time. At this point, how I started, did my revision, which is something my senior mentioned to me, is get past your paper. So again, in your pre-break time, you can collect like at least 10 years of papers that have already come. So that's about 20 papers. And go through those papers. A lot of times questions are repeated in the papers. If you read the last 10 years worth of papers, you would be able to guess certain topics that come very, very often, and that will help you give the exam. So what I used to do was, the first time I read the paper, I wrote down the answers. The second time the same question came, I read the answer again. And I kept going through all of the papers where I read a lot of the answers multiple times, which made the answer easier for me to remember. So when it did come in the paper, it was easier for me to write the answer down. Again, like Nasira said, it's good to discuss topics with friends, where if you talk to them, talk about what they study, what you study, any doubts that you have. I can tell from personal experience, it's really helpful. I had a friend who called me with a doubt the day before our paper, and I had actually skipped that entire topic, but because I discussed it with her, I had to read the topic and I knew it, and it came the next day in the paper for like 5 months, and there was no options. I would have lost those marks if I hadn't discussed. So some people find it stressful to discuss, but I would highly recommend it. And in the last, for your last minute revisions, which at least I feel like earlier exams you would have given the day of the paper or at the most the day before. For this, your last minute revisions, you should give at least 2 days per paper. The very concise notes that she mentioned, you should give it at least 2 days per paper for your absolute last minute revisions. Yeah.
I'm sure whatever Drishti said has stressed a lot of people out, but just know that all of us have gone through that stress, so it's fine. If the timetable is out, I'm assuming some of you are giving the November 10th, it's absolutely fine. In the last 2 months, you can do a lot, right? So even if today you feel like you're not prepared, it's absolutely alright. You've all been very stressed in August, 2 months before the papers, but you can study even now. You have studied. It probably does not register when you're revising and you tend to forget and it builds up the pressure and the stress. It's fine. Continue revising. When you're writing the paper, it will come to you. So don't let the stress, bring you down, and don't let the stress not let you give the paper. Right? A lot of people back out at this point, but they're like, I can't do this, the timetable is out, I can't study in 2 weeks, but that's alright. You can do it. So believe. Firstly, it's a mindset game, right? You believe you can do it, you'll be able to do it. Now in the last 2 months, I would say this is the time you're revising. So hopefully you're done with your first read, hopefully you understood the concept and notes are prepared. Try to do as many revisions, whatever is good for you. If you can do 10 revisions to 10, if you can do 3, do 3. How many ever, just make it count. If you're the person who reads, then keep reading. If you're a person who has to sit with the subject for a very long time, do that. Right? Whatever it's Drishti is studying in a different manner, I study in a different manner, Pradhanamana studying in a different manner, but we all pass. So whatever helps you, don't let anything build up that stress. Secondly, I would say definitely start writing. Even if you're not preparing notes, whatever you're doing, just start writing. All of us have lost the touch with writing, and the first paper practice and procedure is extremely lengthy, and it can be quite disheartening to know an answer and not be able to write it. So please be in a constant practice of writing. If you can start on the first day of the 6 months, do it. If that's something you can't do, you have to start writing the last 2 months. That's absolutely necessary. You don't want your hands cramping when you're writing the paper. Definitely when you studied so hard, right? And the most important thing best way to revise. If you tend to go back to the commentary, that might add to your stress. Because usually, and I think even this time the timetable, you have a day between the papers or maximum 2 between the papers, right? So when you're studying during those 2 weeks, having your notes which you have prepared is comforting. Only revising through a small bunch instead of some papers have 10 subjects, some have 4. But going through all of the commentaries is very difficult in that one day reading. So definitely for your revisions, try to stick to your notes and discuss. Even if it stresses you out, discuss. Even if someone else has studied more than you, discuss. It really helps to exchange how someone else would write an answer. It will add to what you would write. It helps the person you're speaking to. You get new ideas. So that's very important. I hope the people who are sitting here today can form smaller groups and constantly, even if you're not giving the November attempt, constantly discuss the new topics, the new judgments. It's an easier way to understand a concept. So this is what you should do in the last 6 months. I think we covered anything you want to add.
Just going back to when you are studying, what occurred to me is, along with the covenants that I mentioned, what I found useful in the CPC paper, you get High Court rules and you get CPC, which you are supposed to study. CPC is divided into sections and orders. Every section mostly has a corresponding order. So what I had been advised by my seniors was that next to the section, next to the order, you write the corresponding order. So if it is like order 41, it's appeal from order, or order 43, which is appeal from order, you write the corresponding section and you write it in the Bayer Act. The Bayer Acts are absolutely essential. You must know your Bayer Act very well. If you know your Bayer Act very well, it becomes easy to at least answer the basic question. So if you have written the order and the section, you can study the two together. Along with that, you write the corresponding High Court rules. So therefore, when you talk about filing of a claim, there are rules which say how a claim is to be filed. Order file, which is writ of summons, has corresponding rules as to service of summons. So write those corresponding rules, study them together so that it adds to what an examiner, if he asks about writ of summons, you write about High Court rule and you write about the section and you write the order. He feels that yes, this is a student who knows the subject. So it's just a matter of figuring out what works for you. When I read Bayer Acts, I used to make small notes. I never made separate notes because I had a senior who had appeared one year exam before me and he had fantastic notes. So I just got those entire notes and I studied from those. But I used to write a summary of the Bayer Act. So I never read the Bayer Act section at the end. I just read my 2-word summary for each subsection or each section, so I at least knew what was going on. So different things work for different people. So study the way which is most comfortable to you. And one thing which always has worked for me is writing exam papers. So I used to take a 3-hour exam paper. Suppose I finished CPC revision, I would take an exam paper and sit and write for 3 hours and then I would sit and correct it. And when I corrected it, actually would take it 4.5 hours, 5 hours to correct that one paper. I would fail myself in every paper, get majorly stressed out, majorly depressed. But at the end of it, if that question came in the paper when I was appearing for the exam, I immediately remembered, oh, I forgot that point, and I corrected it. And for me that works. For somebody it may not work. So whatever works for you, as they said, everybody has different studying styles. Do what is comfortable.
Just one more point also. They've mentioned so when they have the lecture series, I highly recommend attending those. So we had the series during COVID and they were online. These series, firstly, the people coming in are experts in those specific topics. So they obviously know a lot about the topic. They go into great detail and it's a great way for you to understand get a general idea of the entire act in a span of 2 hours. So you can very quickly at least understand the very basic concepts. If you are lucky enough that for them to prepare notes or PPTs and they share those are also great ways to study and use as your base for your notes and your points, because again they will be very concise. They will have the most important things that you need to keep in mind, and these are almost always solicitors who've given the exam, so they know what comes in the paper. There are probably people who set the papers also, so they will know what questions generally come. So you should attend those sessions, and you should like really pay attention.
On that, I would like to add. On that, what she said, I would like to add that these webinars are already on the new website.
Some of them.
So you can go, it's open to you to watch them. Some of them are there on the website. We'll also try to do the PPTs. I think we have that. If I have, I don't know. I will check. But we can put those PPTs also on the website. So you all can look at it. So that we have. Yeah, login. So now, this under the new website, as article clerks, you will register, and then you will be approved as a registrar, and you will get an email that you have been registered, and your approval is there. Then you can log in as an article clerk, and you will be able to get all information, your information about exams, information about results, everything will come on the website.
The webinars are already loaded in a tab which is under gallery, but there may be a separate tab which will be shown. So whatever webinar, there is a separate tab for webinars now. So you guys can access it even if your login is not done, those are accessible. And the question papers are already there. So that is also accessible. Do an analysis of the question papers, a good analysis. You can predict at least 50 to 60% of your paper. If you do a fantastic, yeah. So Nilesh says all papers are uploaded, so that should help you. That should be your starting point. Yeah, Dasha.
So whenever any student after the class comes to me, my first advice is make notes. Please do not compromise on making your own notes, because when you write, it actually sticks in your head. Then when you're only just and till today, when I'm working on a matter, I make my own notes. That takes you deep into the study, which otherwise by just reading you're not going deep into the matter. So please do not compromise on making notes. Just make your own notes, and as Asira said, short notes. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to have the time to read reams and reams of paper. Just read the relevant portion of a section. You will only have time for that. So please do not compromise on making notes. 2, please read a good commentary book for sections that come regularly. Some commentaries go into reams and reams of paper. Don't read the whole commentary, maybe 30-40 pages, but read the first few maybe pages. Why? Because a good commentary book improves your legal language. So this is not only a LLB paper that you are writing a professional paper. Professionals are correcting your paper. So you need to have good language. They are looking for good language. They are not only looking for say vomiting out sections. They are looking for good language. They are looking for if you have experienced something while you're doing your article, do write that something that some practical knowledge that you may have that will give you extra marks. So don't only just vomit out sections. Be more show the examiner that you have really done a good article, so that will also help you get a good additional mark.
Our next lecture is on the 4th at 5:30. We have Senior Counsel Mr. Vikram Nankani, who has a huge practice in PMA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act. We hope that all of you attend. But before we pass, we want to.
Don't worry. Don't think that everybody has to pass at the first attempt. You can give as many attempts as you want. You will pass. So don't worry. I passed for your information on my 3rd attempt. So there is no great pressure on you to pass at first attempt.
I'll also add, I don't know, I gave grades, so maybe certain things from my side I when I was giving exam, we gave exams together. And that time I was told by my father, the first attempt is like terminals, second is like prelims, and the third is the final. That's what he told. And you don't take it that way, try and attempt to pass in the first attempt, whatever you can. You try. These exams are not difficult. What we as solicitors, when we give the exams or when we set papers, we want to know whether you actually know the law. So your basic law has to be perfect. Forget everything else. You know, you can go to judgments, that all is an addition. But your basic law and knowledge of that should be, that is very important. Another thing which I don't know if he has told you, but AR Bombay and AR Supreme Court you have to study. Make notes, make a register for that. I think she must have told you right. But you know, yeah, ratio is enough. You don't need to, don't write wrong citations, don't write wrong names. Because that sends the setter in a mode of searching whether that judgment is correct or not, and then wastes his time. Then he gets upset and he deducts your mark. So don't do that. You just write the ratio. This is what is there. In problem questions, mainly come from these judgments, which are in AR, Bombay, AR, Supreme. One last thing, I don't know whether she told you, but for conveyancing, you must practice writing the covenants, writing the pleadings. That you have to, when you get tired, you write all that. Whenever you are studying, when you are tired, take a book and write, look and write. Don't try to remember, but at least look and write that. When you write that several times, you will remember. We had that opportunity that there were no computers, there were typewriters. So after the typist used to type those documents, two juniors were kept to sit together. One would read the draft and the other would read the final typed document. So reading that made us remember those documents. And today we can dictate even without looking at any precedent. And I think that's what we can do. I don't know whether your generation can do that. So that's my side of whatever I could give suggestions.
How we've written the papers, and I'm sure you would like to know how to write an answer. A few things is that I'll just go quickly. First thing, be very concise. If it's a 5-mark answer, you don't have to write a page, or if it's a 10-mark answer, you don't have to write 5 pages. It's nothing like that, right? It's a topic, it's a question. You need to satisfy the examiner that you know the answer to this question. So the length of it does not matter, the substance matters. So there is no like 5-mark or so many pages, right? So just be well prepared. The way that you can get good marks and you can impress the examiner, and I'm sure they'll know better, but what really would impress an examiner is writing the section number and writing the judgment, right? Do not, like they said, take out the time, the examiners take out the time to read the paper. Do not write something which you know for a fact is not right. Okay, so write your section. You can start strong. There is a question, you can start strong. This is the section, this is the act. Write about that section. End it with the case law. But all of this needs to be, this comes from being well prepared. So when you're studying also, make it a point to remember your section, remember the case laws. The 2 ways that you can, if I tell you, just study case laws, that's overwhelming. The 2 ways you can study case laws is landmark cases. So every subject will have those landmark cases wherein they are cited time and again. And when there are recent cases, they'll ask you only from the past 3 years, which is basically when you're doing your articulation. Right? So they do not expect you to know everything. So landmark cases obviously you need to know. With certain sections you have those cases, when you're reading commentaries you realize this case law has been at multiple occasions, or the commentary will mention that this is a landmark judgment. So that is something you need to make a note of. Secondly, the recent cases is something that can start in the 2.5 years that we were talking about. is start reading, start discussion, start making your registry, all of that, okay? Secondly, handwriting matters. Don't make it extremely incoherent. That paper examiner needs to be able to understand what you are writing. The papers are extremely lengthy, which is why we say start the practice of writing, which is very important. Improve your handwriting if you can somehow do it, but it needs to be legible. The last thing is be sure of, once you will be solving papers, that's very important. So when you're solving papers, there's no fixed way of paper is. There is not no fixed paper pattern, but you will understand that it's a 3-hour paper. If it's a 5-mark question, I need to give so much time. So time management is extremely important. When you might not feel it right now, but when you're writing the paper, you realize you know a lot more. Okay? But don't try to impress the examiner by just writing one answer for 4 pages long and then you left everything. If you're writing the paper, you really want to show that, oh, I know more, I know more. But you have to have that restraint and write a question and write an answer to a limited level, right? And don't let writing one question diverge you from missing out the paper, because completing the paper is very important. Also, if you don't have the time when you're writing the paper, I would suggest definitely complete your objective answers when you're getting true or false, or it's a 1-word answer, anything compared to a subjective answer. If you don't have the time and you have to make that last minute choice, you should definitely go back to read the question paper, see whatever is an objective answer where you get your marks, and finish that first and then go to your subjective answer. Also, if you want, I think they will tell you better, but you can move around with the question. So question 1 has 10 answers. You can write a question 1 and all 10 answers together, but then move to question 3 with another 5 answers. I think it will be very annoying in that sense if you write question 1 answer, and then third answer. Don't do it that way. But you can skip between the questions, but completely finish one section of the paper and then move on to another. I think these are the ways of questions.
So just one point that I would also add is when you're writing the paper, again this is something that I was taught was, where I'm getting my information from now, but approach the paper like you would approach a client. So say a client comes to you and asks you a question, you have to think of how you can answer that question. So don't restrict it to, okay, this is a question about sale of flat, so I'm just going to look at transfer of property and nothing else. Like when you're selling a flat, there's going to be transfer of property, or contract act is going to come in, maybe cooperative societies will come in, capital gains is going to come in. So if you know points that could arise in that particular question, try and bring it in, which will again impress the examiner that yes, this person does know what they're talking about and they are capable of dealing with the client, and that is what really sets these papers apart from our LLB papers. Because if you read the commercial law papers, it's going to seem like a very simple paper, very similar to the LLB paper with basic contract, partnership and all. But what really sets it apart is the fact that you need to know that little bit more that you would or you should know as a solicitor as compared to someone who's only got an LLB degree. I think so that's what really helps you really pass. And like she said, handwriting is very important, so try and be as careful as you can and make it as legible. And lastly, I think we'd like to end with, I know it sounds very stressful what we've said, but it's actually not so bad. Like she mentioned, it will seem like you don't know what you're doing right now. And this feeling will continue till you actually reach the exam center. Till you reach the center, you feel like, oh, I don't know, I'm not studying enough. But when you see the paper, you realize you've actually worked very, very hard. And you know what you're doing. And write as much as you can. Your 3 years of practice is really going to help you at that point, and you will be able to write the paper. So it's going to work out fine. Like, don't stress. It's going to be good.
If you guys have any questions, please go ahead. Please stand up in this
First of all, let me thank you all.
Pass the mic so you can hear it.
Yeah, I'm Dhanya.
here. First of all, I would like to thank you all for delivering this lecture. I mean, this is really helpful for all of us. And my question here is that, as Lan said, you will be giving us some commentaries, recommend some commentaries. It would be really helpful, especially for taxation. I need to have.
Yeah, so we also had to ask our seniors. You can ask your senior. I don't mind recommending some books, but as Drishti said, whatever you're comfortable with is fine. But we will suggest that some issue. So after the lecture, maybe I can, give you all some whatever recommendations for comment.
And if you could give some hints how to approach a taxation paper and how to write it.
Tax is something that I also didn't do, and the first thing that my partner told me was that start reading. What is it that's scary about tax is that you won't understand it. You just try to understand it. It's not that difficult. It is something we don't, delve in every litigation, but it's like any other subject. Firstly, it's a mental block. Start reading. Start reading. Whatever concept you're not understanding, try to understand those concepts. Eventually, when you're reading, you're making your note, everything, there is no other way to study tax but to study it, right? It's not any different from any other paper. Even if you've not practiced it, pick up the book, right? Start reading. The commentary that I followed was Manoharan, but you can study it from the Blair Act, you can look at videos that are helpful, whatever it is that helps you. But honestly, tax is not that difficult. It is at the end of the day concepts which you have to understand, and it's a very practical paper at the end of the day. So once you start reading it, you start getting more and more comfortable with that.
So, a great way to start with this is tax is only for 50 marks, which is great for us because I think their time it used to be a 100-mark paper, so there's a lot more to study. Because it's only 50 marks.
We have 3 acts: income tax act, gift tax, and wealth tax.
So we only have income tax. We only have income tax and it's only for 50 marks. So there's very limited things they can ask. So what you can do is just concentrate on the more relevant portions of the act as compared to trying and reading the whole act, because it is quite a vast act and it does get amended quite often. So it is a fairly complex. So yeah, there's only certain sections, so it makes it a lot easier. I studied from the income tax ready right now, which is very small, and it sort of, instead of going section wise, it divides everything topic wise, so it was easier to understand the subjects because of that. I also studied from a CA tuition notes, which was in less legal language and was easier to study.
So I wanted to add in tax, because tax is like our forte. In tax, basically you don't have to do any problems. There is no calculation of return, so just forget about it. It's only the basic law that you need to do. Okay? So tax is such a subject where normally CAs do that calculation and all that. Even Manoharan book has a lot of those problems. Just skip those. No solicitor is ever going to ask you how to calculate tax, because that is not our in our. So it is limited to the law. That is what it is. Like she said, this is VG Mehta's ready right now, which my father recommended to me, and I recommended her to me. It's a very short book, small book, using language and gives topic wise, covering all the sections related to that topic. It becomes easier for you. But I want to make it clear from BILS side, we do not recommend any book. You read from whatever book you want, because we don't want students or article clerks then to come and say, oh, it is out of my book or it is out of my course. So course is the subject, course is not any book. So whatever we can recommend to you, that you can read from that. That should not be taken that this is the book we suggested, and therefore anything out of that book is out of the course. Please keep that in mind. Okay? So VG Mehta is one book. There is another book on tax which is called Master Guide to Income Tax Act, which comes every year. You don't need to read the entire Master Guide. but there are a lot of topics in there. It starts with the Finance Act, explanation of the new Finance Act. So that helps you know what is the new change in the Income Tax Act in the budget. So you know that certain sections have been deleted, certain sections have been. But if you read the budget, you will not understand because you don't know what is the act or what is the particular section. This explains that what has been introduced and what has been removed. It has at the back case laws on income tax. Very famous case laws. You can restrict it to either topics or you can restrict it to certain Bombay or Supreme Court judgments. There are a lot of case laws. There are a lot of circulars in that which are helpful. You can do it or skip. Then there are sections like section 10, which are all the exemptions, and 18, which is all the deductions. These are given together as a table in this master plan. So it helps you do that instead of reading those sections in the bare. Bare Act is very difficult to read. It goes from one section to the other, then it says you refer to this section and then proviso and proviso. So these are the acts which you can do in reading. Acts which will help you. Like she says now it's 50 marks. You need not to concentrate on that. Anybody else has any question?
I have a question, like when you said that you have to write down the papers while preparing. So there are 9 acts in general. In case of conveyance, there are 4, 5. So how do you write? Basically, you take each act and you attempt all the 20 papers like that, or you actually solve the entire paper after reading all the acts. I don't know if I am right.
All the papers after reading those acts.
And initially when you're studying, you can do just short notes. You can pick up this, say, okay, I've studied transfer property. Let me see what is there. Let me answer a question on transfer property. You don't need to. Only after you've studied the whole paper can you sit and solve it for 3 hours.
Yeah, but then say what she said was little.
Yeah, so what I did was I actually sat with the question paper, sat with
Exactly.
the
So I want to
read
understand
each
that
and every
point.
question and I wrote each and every answer. But again, like I said, everyone here has solved papers, but we've all solved it in different ways.
Different
So
manner.
you, however, I did all the questions because it helped me also swap that fast. Like you mentioned, General Acts has 11 acts and you only get 3 hours. So you have to learn how to swap between those subjects.
So
Very,
when you
very
were
fast.
reading, did you like finish the entire act and then you went for the note? So
I
simultaneously you do
saw
all the
it
acts
one-
together?
I did one whole reading of my entire whatever subjects were there, and then like say today I'm attempting the commercial law paper. I will attempt the whole paper, whatever acts. There are 4 acts. I'll attempt all 4, and I look at the book and I actually looked at the commentaries and wrote down the answers while looking at the book. So I didn't attempt it like a paper. I formatted, like I created answers while looking at the books, and then I used that as my base to make my notes. Yeah, again, I should mention this though, my timeline is a little skewed as compared to all of you because you've got 6 months to give your paper. I was originally supposed to give my attempt in 2020 when COVID hit. So yeah, so our exam was actually supposed to be 8 days after lockdown started. So we had already been studying for 6 months and then our paper kept getting postponed for 2-3 months at a time. So eventually I ended up studying for 2 years. So I had a lot more time and that's why I had a lot more revision to do, which is why I was able to do a lot of it. So like I did all of, like I solved the whole paper, she did it after she finished her revision, some people solved it like an actual exam paper, some people did it act-wise. So it really depends on what you are comfortable doing. Like are you comfortable swapping between subjects or would you prefer to read everything first and then solve it like a paper? It's a very personal choice on how you like to study and what is comfortable for you.
Comes to answering questions from, for example, with regards to short notes or long answers versus practical questions. A approaches you and so and so. what is a good structure to follow in both the situations to write the answer?
So both you approach in a very similar manner. The thing that you can do with a short note is that you, like I said, you get there'll be a topic. It will be in regards to a section. You might know case laws to that section. You can write it. You probably practice writing your answer in that manner, so you can write it exactly how it is. When it comes to a practical question, as Drishti said, if it connects to acts, definitely add that. Only because an act is not a part of a particular paper, it does not stop you from adding that to the question. It just shows that you have knowledge and you have holistic knowledge of everything that you study, and you have the capability to connect two acts together, right? So when you're doing a practical question, it now needs to go as an advice. What you understood from the lecture also, there are solicitors who are going to be checking your paper. So you have to give sound advice in that situation. So it needs to come from, you should definitely add sections if you can. You should definitely give clear advice. It shouldn't be because you don't know the answer is very vague and you try to please all parties in that question. It shouldn't be like that. Take a stand. It might be a stand which is different from the examiner's point of view, but if you are able to justify that stand and you are able to convince the examiner, he might also give you points for that. So there is no right or wrong. Usually there are 2-3 correct answers to one practical question. So approach it in the most realistic, practical manner.
And like it was mentioned earlier, so yeah, conveyancing could be a hypothetical scenario, but a lot of other papers, like for IPC or even for the practice and procedure paper, a lot of times your practical questions will be from the 3 years worth of case law. So they literally just pick up the issues from that and ask that as a question. So if you can start off by saying this is similar to this case that happened, if you can name the case, great. If you can't, it's similar to a high court case that happened or a Supreme Court case that happened. And then if you've read the cases and you've done it, you will know the answer and you just need to write what the ratio is that is there. And that's.
I just want to add to that what they are saying is that as an examiner, I have set papers, I have corrected papers. So when you answer this kind of question, when the question is said by the examiner, he will not give you the full facts. So then you may get jumbled sometimes that, oh, this is not mentioned, this is not mentioned. It happens. You can assume facts, or you can say, if it is like this, then this is the answer. If it is like this, then this is the answer. If you know that, this, like sometimes in conveyancing papers, it is asked that there is a person leaving a will, he died, this is it, Indian succession or something. Something may not be mentioned. You can presume. That is also a way to write. Okay. But then you give that, you just don't write it. You say, I presume that this is it. If it is not this, then this is it. Okay.
And like Nasira mentioned, law is great in the sense that it's a very gray subject. There's no absolute right or wrong answers. Actually, if you can justify your point. I mean, even when you say litigations, both sides are going to be partially correct. So even in these situations, the situation is going to be such that any answer that you give can be correct as long as you can justify what you are saying.
You could throw some light on when we say we have to reproduce a particular section. Of course, when the sections are very long, there are individual keywords that you can't replace no matter what you write. You have to produce those particular words. But there may be instances where the section is so long and obviously you can't produce it as it is. So how do you go about that part? If you can tell us how to reproduce a particular section.
You don't have to reproduce the section. How do you go about it? Is there a question is in relation to a particular section? You can mention
The section number.
section number, and you can rephrase it as well.
Break it up and do point-wise underlining or whatever. It's not that you have to go through the section.
You just need to know the substance.
Yes, I have the section. The paraphrase in your words. It's not possible to mount up the whole line.
example, what she is saying about order 37, that if you are told to draft the summary, then what are you supposed to mention in the plate? In a summary. That is what you should know, and that is what you should write. Then you get marks. It's like
the idea is not that you know exactly what's in the act. The idea is you know where to look in the act to find the particular answer. The only places where you need to reproduce, I think, is if the question specifically says define so and so, and that will only be maybe the definitions that come, which will always be two-line things. And there are very specific again acts where they would ask you to define certain things, which again, if you read past your papers, you will know what definitions you need to do.
there is one point there.
Hi, thank you for the session. So, in case you do not clear it in the first attempt, how do you approach the subsequent events, given that in most situations you'll be going back to work, you'll be having a period of say 6 months towards the next exam where you'll mostly be working for say 4 to 5 months. How do you approach this time and how do you approach the next attempt?
So my boss, when I failed the first time, said, I'm not going to give you any more time. So I dropped it. Because I thought that my goal was different from his goal. His goal was that I need something to do my work. My goal was that I need to pass this exam. So it's a call that you have.
Otherwise, if you are doing an exam a second time, you may see your marks. You may have passed some paper, you may not have passed some paper. Assuming that you are failed all, you can choose to, depending on the time gap, like this time exam results came a bit late, that's why exams are in November instead of before the run, because we are trying to give the students time to study. Assuming that you know after you appeared for the exam, okay, this paper, most likely I will fail. So maybe you can start studying with work. Or maybe your boss may not take as drastic an action as right now. But maybe you will request that fellow or the lady that please give me a 15-day break, give me a 30-day break. Try and study in the nights, try and study in the morning, try and study while traveling. You've already studied. It's now just trying to hone those skills and put it. So maybe don't do all 6 papers again. Do 2 at a time. Because it's only the first attempt that you need to do 3. Then you can choose your 6 consecutive attempts. So long as you pass the exam in 6 consecutive attempts, do 1 paper at a time, 2 papers at a time, whatever works.
You need more prepared this time for the exam. What happens is, like she mentioned, there's no set standard paper. So it's not like there's only this many 5-mark questions, this many 10-mark questions, this many. They can ask you anything, but you'll be more prepared because you've already finished your studying, you have your notes already, and you've already attempted the paper, so you know how to approach the exam. You will know what went wrong the first time, so it'll be easier for you to study the second time around. Also, like it depends on how you failed in the first attempt. Like she mentioned, it could be some papers appear. There have been several cases where people have actually passed all the papers but they've not got their aggregate. So then you start picking on those subjects and you limit what you need to study. You pick on your strongest. So then it really depends on that. But yeah, definitely take like a low performance for the second attempt.
So basically, when you attempt the second time, those who have failed, for example, you failed all paper, then maybe do only 1 paper. I think, please check the rule. I think second attempt. First attempt. Only on the first attempt, as far as I know. You do 3 minimum, but please check the rules. I may be a bit rusty. So if you are allowed, check the rules. If you are allowed to do say 1 paper, then do that 1 paper, do it well, clear it with good marks. And as soon as that paper gets over, start studying for the next 2 or 3 papers for your third attempt. So you will get that proper 4 months or whatever, and that will be enough for you to prepare for your third attempt.
So the weights in paper. So apart from all the standard dates like date of conveyance where you're supposed to write and reproduce, if it's a sale deed for such, that would go to into pages. You know, I've read all the covenants. It can go to. I've seen the books. They go for pages. So can you reduce that? I mean, you have to produce the entire sale deed as it is in the books,
If you are told to draft the sale deed, it will be for minimum 15
or 18, 20
20
marks.
marks. Just now, I think in this exam, a gift deed was asked. Now, gift deed has the 4 covenants and nothing more, and a bit of recital. It's completely doable if it's a 15-mark answer. If you know your covenants, each covenant will maybe a page. Or if there's a covenant production of title deeds, it will go into 1.5 to 2 pages. And that's with my big hand. So, if it is completely doable. If it's a 15-mark answer, you have to write 5 or 6 pages.
What basically is that you need to give too much of recitals.
Yeah.
Basic things what is required has to be mentioned. Like your abandonment clause or whatever the covenants are, or those kind of opening section, signature section, all that has to be proper. The receipt clause. For example, as she mentioned, there is a gift deed. You know that the gift has to be between 2 individuals or whatever. What is the question that you will receive? And accordingly, suppose there is a document where company is transferring something or trust is transferring, then you should know how to name the party and how the common seal clause will come. All that has to be mentioned. But in between stories, you can.
So
Recitals can be reduced.
Of course. Thank you.
You don't have to write like there were 10 prior title deeds, so you recite each title deed as to how the person became owner. That all may not be necessary.
Unless the question says.
Unless the question
explains that so and so inherited, then so and so sold to so and so, then you will have to recite. But most likely it will not be like that. So you can just start with he's been possessed of, and then directly go into the sale. Yeah, sure. I don't think that is.
It's not possible for a reason. We can't have model papers because every paper is set by a different solicitor. And we cannot have curves on them that you have to set it this way. Okay? So, no, that also, because that we don't want to give, if you don't want to make it a 3-test paper and say, okay, study this, give this answer and pass. Solicitors have to have some some level of passing. It's not, we don't want to make it like a university exam, LLB exam, do 3 test papers and pass. There has to be a level. So, no, once we give the answers, then you will expect that this is my answer from the model. So if there is anything else, then it is wrong. How can you not give me marks? It can't be like that. That's why we are saying the books are not suggested. You study. If you go even to London to do your solicitors, they don't give you all this. They say you search, you do studies, and you write your papers.
So what the examiner was looking at is that you know the substance and you know a little bit more practical knowledge of how things function in real situation. So and they are looking at good, I must tell you that they are looking at good language and they are looking at that little something more that you have.
Knowledge of law.
Knowledge or some little practical thing. Even if you have encountered it, write it. There's no harm at all.
The idea is to prepare you to practice law. Tomorrow, once you have passed, clients will come to you. When clients come to you, you can't look for model test answers for that. You have to answer them. Say, okay, this is your problem. I know this is, you have to look into this act, you have to look into this act, you have to look into this judgment. That is what we are preparing. These solicitors, that's why a different exam than law exams. We are preparing you for practicing as solicitors so that tomorrow a client comes to you, you can answer them.
All solicitors don't give the same advice. The same question when one client will go to a solicitor, they tell one solicitor will see something and so one solicitor will see something. So really they are looking at your
and believe me, the solicitors correct papers. A lot of them take a lot of time over issue. It takes a
At
lot
least
of
half an hour
Yeah,
per
minimum.
paper.
But it's
And
mainly.
if there are some 150 papers to correct, you imagine the time that they spend on correcting from their work, giving up their work and things.
And some of them first go through some papers, see the level of the batch, and then again recorrect. So it is a lot. It's not like a university paper that in 2 minutes I'll get 5 rupees. There's no money paid.
It's quite entertaining also because sometimes the answers are really too funny.
No, once
That is
I
what we don't want actually.
Yeah,
Because we are
that's very irritating.
very irritating.
like I had once corrected a paper. It was completely illegible, but there were 20 marks of objectives. Those objectives were completely legible and all correct. So I realized that that student has somehow managed to copy. And obviously that student failed miserably. But it was frustrating, that I was actually initially trying to figure out what is written. I really struggled till I came to the objectives and I realized this student actually doesn't know anything. How does that writing become finally legible? So please.
I had such an experience in the general arts paper which I had sent, where I had put a practical question from a judgment, and that person somehow wrote some other judgment name, and I had to spend at least 3 hours searching that judgment. That look, I may be wrong. I don't want the student, who has quoted a particular with the citation. There is a so and so. I went on searching. Where is it? 3 hours I spent. And then I said, there is no such judgment, and this fellow is just, allowed something. And literally I was so irritated that I gave him less marks. That should not happen. With examiner, you don't waste your time. If you don't know, don't write. Rather than writing something and sending him into a spin somewhere else.
I would also add is like we mentioned, because how you write sort of determines the mood of the examiner. I would say go through the question paper first, and then questions that you know for a fact you know very, very well, maybe start with those. If you start out strong, the examiner will feel, oh, this person does know what they're saying, and it will create that sort of mood for them which will maybe make your marks better.
This is true what she says. The mind of the examiner immediately becomes favorable to you. This person knows, so they go to the extent of helping you, they give you a little bit more mark.
See, examiners are not perverse. They don't want to fail you. They want to pass you as much. But the substance has to be there. Sometimes it's very difficult for an examiner to give that extra 1 mark or the extra 2 marks. And it's not as if the examiners have the last word. It all goes back to the judge in charge. And then the judge in charge sees, sometimes the judge in charge says that, these students, I think you have a relook at. And then it again goes back to the examiner. So it's a process. But like Kajiji was our examiner in charge when we did the exam. And the first time when we had our CPC paper, he told us this is not an LLB exam. Please do not lie. If you don't know the answer, leave it. And I had actually got so scared that I had left out things which I was not sure of. I'm not telling you to do that. But when you know for sure that you do not know the answer, you just want to, kind of wing it and just write anything, don't do that. Because then that's very irritating for an exam. If you kind of know the answer, I'm not saying don't attempt. Attempt. Put your best information, whatever you know, you try and put it together. But don't wing an answer and just write any garbage and rubbish.
Any more questions?
So one last question. See, true or false? For false answer, do we have to explain it if it is coming for 2 marks?
Yes. 2-line explanation.
Yeah. Because in the question, sometimes they write say true or false and give an explanation.
Give
Then we
reasons.
have to write.
Give reasons for your answer.
Yeah, they
Yes.
usually ask you to.
Any more?
So that there is no such case.
Then
was in solitude, without looking at any document, as if you are in an exam, you yourself will realize what you know and what you don't. So for the things you don't know and you have not answered, go back and revise them.
So check your answer. Check your answer. You know, have you? Because very often when you answer, you will have remember 3 points, and there may be 3 more points. Like if you are best educator, there are so many things. You may not remember everything. When you look at the book again to see that have I answered it correctly, you may find that yes, I missed out like 3 other points, and that when you do, you will remember better.
While writing also, if there are like she said, 3 plus 3, you have written here that the page blank. Go on to the next question.
Right.
I don't remember. I don't want to waste time remembering. Then you remember, so you can write down.
Also, while you're studying, maybe when you write an answer, if you want like a nice marks or a nice senior, maybe write an exam paper, give it to them, and ask them to correct the paper. Especially if it's someone who's maybe set papers before, I think that also, like I used to give my papers first correction, and that's when I realized, I was like, oh, this is what's missing. You should add this answer at this point. Or maybe even a friend who's giving the exam with you, if you swap papers, they will have a more, like a better perspective of what you missed out maybe, and then that will help you.
Or somebody who appeared for an exam the year before, 20 years before, maybe even to see your answer and say, you know, I did it this way. So that may help. I think we've finished.
All solicitors and masters are late. None of the solicitors and masters are there. Anyone you approach, I'm sure they will. Even if your master doesn't have his book, somebody else will help. Like we always welcome. I have got so many requests from so many friends saying, my son is doing my daughter. Can you write them?
So now you all know that you can approach me.
Yeah, I'm openly saying, anybody can come to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a request. There is this notice thing where we had 21, I think, videos, but only some accesses are being given and some are not, and which are not in a part of the website. So, if you can give that liberty to all of us, it will be great. Where they should have taken income tax.
We have to figure out where they are.
It's there in the link on the groups, the entire
Why don't you share the link with us? We'll try and
No, I have that. Some of the password is changed.
Yeah, that's the problem, because some are accessible but some
The
are not.
problem is they were recorded by somebody, you know, and that person has forgotten the password, and now we also don't know how to do
There
that.
are ways that
I'm
we can
trying
change
to do
password
that.
and
Actually,
some-
I have it on the
Very
hard
good,
disk.
because in that I heard your conveyancing session, I heard his income tax, and that's very good.
His income tax, I think, is already on
It's
our
there. It's on the
website.
So there are many such like that.
Just Manuka also, some of them what happened to the solicitors that nobody don't know.
Yeah, there was only one person.
So that person should be
So, no, I had it on a hard disk. Somehow that hard disk crashed. Unfortunately, so I lost those. I had some on my laptop. Those are uploaded. That's what I will still check if I have somewhere else. So I used to save for 3 cases. The main hard disk crashed. So I lost it.
We really had a great sessions that time.
We will be having again, we are starting 30 MLAs here. On 20th, we are now having on 70 by basic only. And that's why we are recording. You see, even this session we are recording. We will be putting it on either on our website or on YouTube.
Thank you so much.
I think we need to thank both Krishti and Asira.
thing is very important. That once you pass it, you become a part of the Solicitors family. We are like a family. Okay? We treat ourselves a little different. Everybody is jealous of them, whatever it is. But we are a family, and then there is a lot of trust between solicitors when you do transactions. That you must maintain. You must maintain respect for seniors. That is also very important, that you respect your senior solicitors, go to their office whenever you are dealing with them, give them that respect. Learn from them. You learn a lot from them also in your practice. So do that.
I say the same solicitor who said he did not give me leave, now it's we work.
So, and each and every solicitor, most of them are very, very helpful. Even if you don't know them and you approach them, as to I don't know, can you help me? They will help you without expecting anything in return. Without expecting that you pay their fees or they will help you. So treat this solicitor as a family, be like a family, be trustful of them. You also maintain that trust, be very, very honest in your dealings. And your deals will go very smoothly.
All the best to all.
All the best.